Namaskar. In this lesson, we are going to study about regional planning and development. Regional development is the provision of aid and other assistance to regions which are less economically developed. Regional development may be domestic or international in nature. The implications and scope of regional development may therefore vary in accordance with the definition of a region and how the region and its boundaries are perceived internally and externally. The field of regional planning is so vast, diverse and complex. Its methodologies and techniques being yet in the infancy stage of their concretization, the people for whom the planning exercise is undertaken being so apprehensive, and the interest of the planners, the bureaucrats, the elected representatives and the society in general being so conflicting with each other. The practice of regional planning in reality becomes no less than a Herculean task. The problems that confront the field of regional planning emanate from: first, people apprehensions; second, conflicting interest of various partners in the action space of regional planning; third, previous none too happy experiences of regional planning exercises; sudden midway changes in the prerequisites of a successful plan; fifth, sudden developments necessitating either revision or a complete abandoning of a specific regional plan; sixth, visible contradictions between administrative boundaries and regional boundaries; seventh, high level of people expectations from a regional plan; difficulties in the way a simultaneous comparison between what the region at present is and would it look like after the completion of the plan, that is pre-plan regional personality and the post-plan regional personality; planners' inadequacies in certain allied fields; conceptual inadequacies, weakness of the institutional structure, and finally, methodological inadequacies and limitations of techniques of regional planning. The initial problems of regional planning begin at the teething stage itself, with people in general being apprehensive about it. The people in general have apprehension that regional planning or the planned development of their area may bring with it many unwarranted restrictions upon the freedom, their choice and action. It is sure that such restrictions are certainly appendant to planned development, because planning puts an end to all haphazard development or expansion. Most individuals like to have greater independence than what is normally permitted under the planned development. Secondly, there are many partners in the planning activity, namely the planners, the bureaucrats, the politicians and the society in general. In the present day's complex society, there may be conflicting interest of the planners whose ultimate objective is social welfare. The bureaucrats, who may not be as far-sighted as the planners; the politicians, for whom comprehensive regional plan may become a liability at re-election time; the society in general, whose rationality concept may not match completely with the rationality concept of the planners. Thirdly, public experience with previous regional planning exercises may not have been a happy experience due to poor quality plans or some other limitations. Many plans may be ill-conceived or poorly conceived. Not that all plans in the past have been a failure; in fact, it would be more realistic to confess that some of the regional plans an utter failure, some have met with partial success, for example DVC of India, and some have been fairly successful, for example TVA of USA. However, like all other human adventures, failures in the field of planning too have rarely been acknowledged and forgotten soon after, though to err is human and no one likes to admit the error. Therefore, rarely post-failure investigative studies have been conducted to bring the causes of failure in the limelight so as to avoid their recurrence. Fourthly, sometimes the vital prerequisites for the success of a plan may change unexpectedly before or midway during the implementation of a regional plan. It is more common in case of regional planning because regions often cut across the administrative or state boundaries. The typical example in this regard is that of the National Capital Region of India, where more than one state are involved and whose unqualified and unconditional cooperative is the basic prerequisite has always been found wanting, which has resulted in the complete failure of the plan. Closely associated with it is the factor of certain sudden developments that may necessitate a thorough revision or a complete abandonment of a specific regional plan. Sometimes, when a regional plan has already been prepared, suddenly certain developments may warrant its reconsideration even before the process of its implementation gets started. Visible contradiction between administrative boundaries of regional units for planning purpose also is the chief source of problems for the field of regional planning and development. There is, in fact, greater need to relate regional planning more and more with natural regions. It seems that the early man recognized this fact for more because of his technological limitations and knew the natural boundaries more than the modern man equipped with better technologies. The field of regional planning aimed at societal well-being can in no case be restricted to such artificial boundaries, some of which may have been the product of crude surgery of history. For example, does it make any sense to plan for, say, Chandigarh in isolation from the surrounding areas that may fall in the jurisdictions of Punjab, Haryana and Himachal Pradesh? Such contradictions are hardest to remove because the local, regional and provincial interests are too deep rooted. Nonetheless, problems relating to jurisdictional boundaries need to be resolved and overcome with a view to making planning effective, efficient and fruitful. It must be borne in mind that planning can be most fruitful when it supports the regional realities rather than contradicting the same. Sometimes the problems of regional planning are self-created or are of its own creation. The regional planning must recognize its own limitations. No regional plan can ever be convinced to resolve all the ailments of a region. Therefore, regional plans need to be realistic in their formulations and should in no case raise the expectations level of the society to such a level which cannot be accomplished. Since regional planning deals with future regions, the society may have to wait for being able to see the region getting transformed. It may thus never be possible to compare the existing regional setting with the future conditions of the same region, as the two do not coexist at the same point in time and under the same conditions. The problems emanating from such a situations are mainly of preceptor nature. Since regional planning by nature is a multidisciplinary field, the planners are likely to suffer from their inadequacies relating to proficiency in allied field. For instance, illiteracy of most of the planners in the field of mathematics is perhaps the most serious handicap in this regard. The intent here is not to convey that all planners must get converted into mathematicians, but they need to brush their mathematical skills, especially when planning has to deal with the system of regions. Familiarity with the language of mathematics shall certainly improve the planning effort, especially in the present day cyber age. These are some of the sources in general wherefrom a variety of problems relating to the field of regional planning emanate. In that, conceptual problem is the one. The conceptualization of the discipline of regional planning itself has had a checkered history. During the course of its historical development, many definitions emerged in response to varying pressures from within the society. each influenced by a powerful intellectual group of its own time. It came to be conceptualized as a unique synthesis, physical and economic planning under the influence of those who had their concern behind the economic development of areas. It came to be conceptualized as means of upgrading the quality of life under the influence of those who had their major concern in deprivation of or access to social opportunities, including political participation. Regional planning is a discipline which is distinctive in many respects. It is distinctive in the sense that it operates in a distinctive environment that is very much different from an environment of dealing with any single phenomenon, say urban land use, transportation, economy, agriculture, industry, etc. Distinctive in the sense that it operates with a distinctive institutional structure which does not have the authority to implement its own policy decisions. Distinctive in the sense that its operational space consists of a multi-scale hierarchical regional setup which necessitates the discipline to have expertise in integrative skills. And distinctive in the sense that it draws upon the knowledge that seeks to unfold the reality as to how the society operates in integration with regional space. Next is problems of institutional base. The success of regional planning to a large extent depends upon the extent to which the society accepts the relevance of regional planning itself and the strength of its institutional base, which determines its ability to implement its regional policy. Unfortunately, regional planning does not have an adequate institutional base or institutional structure of its own implement its own decisions. It does not have any regional authority to execute regional planning actions. Public actions take place only either through central or state government organs. The creation of such a regional authority therefore requires bold decisions, critical institutional reforms and dilution of authority of certain existing institutions. Unless the governments at center or state level get adjusted to the idea that spatial justice is contingent upon sincere implementation of regional planning policies, the institutional infrastructure of the regional authority cannot be created. And unless adequate institutional base gets created, the existing institutional dilemma shall continue to plague the emergence of regional planning as a forceful tool for regional development. Next is problems related to methodology and techniques. First and foremost problem relating to methodology and technology is related to the method used in regional planning. The field of regional planning is too recent, there is too little experience of the actual operations of the methods of regional planning. For instance, how does the regional planning method really operates is not yet clear. Similarly, how does the scale of a region influence the information collection and post-plan evaluation also is not very clear. However, the critical issue here is that whether there could be any single explicit or implicit method of regional planning, keeping in view the fact that each region is unique with respect to its problems and prospects and has its own situational context. Therefore, the method chosen as well as the selected regional plan for each region has to be different from each region. It would not be any exaggeration to say that the conscious choice of an appropriate method has to be made for each regional plan exercise, and each method has its own merits and demerits. The two most commonly used methods of regional planning have been the design method and the regional method. The design method is generally considered too complex. However, chief strength of the design method lies in the fact that it provides freedom to the plan designer to use his skills and abilities. complexities of the regional method, on the other hand, lie in the fact that its use requires large scale spatial modeling of the regional system. Such a spatial modeling of the regional system is most difficult and laborious. We face many problems in both theory and practice of model building. Problem of scale is central to both theory and practice of regional modeling. For instance, regional models may have to embrace a number of spatial levels, as is the case with regional multiplier. The regional multiplier analysis may have to be concerned with, say, income and expenditure flows not only at regional level but also at national or international levels. Forecasting is considered one of the most important techniques applied in regional planning. In order to improve the level of forecasting from highly subjective to highly objective, the regional planners needs to have some of his lessons in econometrics. Within these two extremes of being highly subjective and purely objective, forecasting can also be done by extrapolation either manually or mechanically. For doing mechanical extrapolation, familiarity with the use of computers is important. Thus, knowledge of computers becomes essential. Sophisticated forecasting depends upon the model used for understanding the working of a system. Accuracy of forecasting depends upon the capacity of the model used for unmasking the complexities of the actual system. Similarly, in manpower forecasting, usually two different methods are used: the inquiry method and the statistical methods. Inquiry method is highly subjective and is helpful only in short term forecasting. On the other hand, the main disadvantage of the statistical methods is that qualitative parameters of labor cannot be taken into account. But the statistical methods are certainly better than the inquiry method, which depends heavily upon inquiry from the employers about their labor needs. The labor supply forecast suffer mainly from the problems of identification and assessment of the components of the labor supply, such as age component, sex component, technical skill component, educational component, etc. These components themselves are based upon population projections, which have their own limitations. Moreover, such aspects as minimum school leaving age, mean age at marriage, incidence of female participation in jobs, overall growth rate of labor requirement, etc. all create their own complications in the labor supply forecasting. Above all, people perception is equally important in the development process, because the choice of selection of criteria or indicators of social needs depends upon the perception of the people involved. So far, the use of social area technique has been more or less restricted to town planning. Should it mean that regional planning so far has remained unconcerned with social concerns of the society, or should it mean that social concerns need to be made more dear to regional planning in times to come? Next is the remedies. It needs stressing here that the institutions created in different parts of the world for limited purposes of executing a specific regional policy have failed to deliver the goods so far. There is certainly a need for creating an independent institutional structures or a regional authority with the specific objective of the executing such a regional policy decisions, which have finally been accepted by the concerned governments. In the absence of institutional base, many good regional plans prepared with all good intentions, hard labor and huge capital expenditure shall continue to gather dust on the shelves of the stores of various organs of the government. Model building activity requires strong theoretical base. For being proficient at model building, one needs to be proficient in proper identification of the purpose of the model, proper identification of the constitution of the system, proper identification of the time scale involved, and hence proper conceptualization of the forecasting techniques. The methodologies and techniques of analyzing and evaluating alternative strategies of regional planning are still in their infancy stage and hence suffer from a variety of problems relating to both theory and practice of regional planning. However, there is a general feeling that plan evaluation techniques equip the regional planners with better explicit choices for their plans. Therefore, it is all the more necessary to make the techniques problem free and as objective as possible. The use of computers can help making these techniques more and more sophisticated and objective. Next is the future prospects. In the final count, regional planning and its relevance to future society seems to be at stake. Its future relevance to society in different socio-cultural, economic and political context is contingent upon the degree of effort of the society is able to put in the practice of regional planning and in resolving the variety of difficulties, problems and issues that confront the discipline. The future of regional planning thus lies in first, allaying or dispelling people's oppressions about its misgivings and misconceptions. Second, taking adequate preventive measures against the conflicting vested interest of various partners like planners, bureaucrats, politicians, etc. involved in conceptualization, approval and execution of a regional plan. Third, learning good lessons from the past experiences of regional planning exercises carried out in different parts of the world. Fourth, sustaining continuity of thought and action without radically changing the situational context. Fifth, visualizing consistently, coherently and most objectively the kind of order to be created while taking due note of all possible midway developments. Minimizing the impact of contradictions between administrative and genuine planning region boundaries and coinciding such boundaries with administrative boundaries as far as possible. Seventh is imparting training to the would-be planners in all such allied fields as public health, public administration, sociology, geography, econometrics, mathematics, etc. so as to improve the quality and level of their proficiency. Defining as clearly as possible the goals and the concepts in regional planning, leaving limited scope for ambiguity, and establishing a strong institutional base in the form of a strong statutory regional authority armed with adequate legal powers to implement its own policy decisions. All this could be possible by developing regional planning as an important useful tool for the good of society in general. Second is developing regional planning in the context of prevailing well-knit regional system. Third, taking due care of the inherent limitations of the theory and practice of regional planning. Fourth, developing regional planning in integrations with other such planning as town planning, country planning, etc. Developing regional planning through teaching of the basic principles, concepts and practice of the discipline from the early secondary school level with a view to creating awareness about the utility among the young minds to prepare them as future components of plan development. Developing as a regional integrating force that integrates planning effort at all levels of regional hierarchy. Developing regional planning as a comprehensive whole, taking due care of all elements of regional structure in unison. Developing regional planning as a specialized field with a view to securing the kind of status such a discipline deserves in the present day fast changing societal functioning. Ninth is developing regional planning with an international orientation, keeping in mind the objective of planning in universalism and above all, bringing the people's concept of rationality as close to the planner's concept of rationality as possible. Only then regional plan and development could be successful in achieving its objective of the societal good in its best earnest. Lastly, I conclude by saying that the field of regional planning is so vast, diverse and complex, its methodologies and techniques being yet in the infancy stage of their concretization. The people for whom the planning exercise is undertaken being so apprehensive, and the interest of the planners, the bureaucrats, the elected representatives and the society in general being so conflicting with each other. The practice of regional planning in reality becomes no less than a Herculean task. Regional plan and development could be successful in achieving its objective of the societal good in its best earnest only when it is able to overcome the above said problems and by adopting tools that are discussed in the future prospects of this lesson.